Everyone's still awake, it looks like, after lunch, so this is a good start already. I have a presentation, but I'm not intending to be super formal, and we'll have a lot of time for Q&A, and I hope that's not just directed at me, but can also be an open discussion as we go from there. But what I want to do is just share a little bit of observations, and I had my bingo card this morning, and I have a full card already. I think you'll see as a lot of what I'll share here, I think ties together really nicely some of the pieces talked about this morning, and that I'm hoping sets up the industry discussion really well on that front as well. Just a little bit of context before we get started. I just wanted to share a little bit more about QIC because we're a bit of an unusual organization. QIC is the National Business-Led Quantum Consortium, and there's not quite another organization like us in Canada or for emerging technology, I would say as well. We're kind of like an industry association, but it's a nascent sector. It's a nascent industry that's still developing as well. So we're very grateful. We've got funding through the National Quantum Secretariat and work really closely with government partners, though that we are not government. We do represent the industry voice, but it's really that public-private partnership coming together to stand up this new strategic sector. We work with about 75 organizations across Canada. Most of the quantum organizations in the room today are members or affiliates of QIC, which we're really proud about. And our mission is to translate Canada's incredible Canadian quantum capabilities and strengths that have been developed over decades into global business success, national prosperity, and long-term security. So this is also really interesting, I think, when you look at us trying to actually get ahead of some of the challenges we might have seen in other past deep tech sectors in Canada, where we've really shone on the research excellence side, but then we've tripped up when it comes to commercialization. So we're trying to get ahead of that and look at how do we write a different future for Canada in a really critical strategic sector. Other thing I just want to point out is that we work across the whole gamut of quantum technologies, also including post-quantum cryptography and the supply chain behind it. So really taking a holistic lens into what's needed to set up a vibrant industry, but ultimately a vibrant quantum economy as well. I'm not going to go through the definition of quantum technologies, but just to put up here, I want to just point out something a little bit different. I'm going to bring this focus to this presentation as well, or for this conversation. Quantum will be foundational to Canada's defense and security for decades to come. That foundation is being set right now, but it's really the choices that we're making right now that are going to determine that position. And I'll share some observations that will lend to that a little bit more. But just going back to, I think probably what's been center square of buzzword bingo for the past year have been dual use and sovereignty. The context for quantum is really important to understand. All quantum technologies are dual use technologies, I would say in the truest sense of them as well. And the context, and I'll hammer this out a little bit more, but really for a lot of quantum technologies and the acceleration you're seeing right now, these are defense first technologies. And a lot of our allies and adversaries alike are actively reaching into their ecosystems to pull through capabilities into deployment at speed. And I'll give you some examples of that. Looking at GPS spoofing and jamming that's happening right now. This is impacting the defense context, but also civilian aviation in different areas. So we're seeing a lot of different countries that are actually reaching in to their ecosystems to pull through quantum positioning, navigation, and timing, and some of these solutions to have resilience against some of those attacks and other issues. This is happening across a number of technologies, but we're seeing that really accelerate. And what we're seeing right now globally with the acceleration in defense spending and prioritization, a lot of this is going towards quantum systems because they're just so essential in a warfighting context. And just to put this in perspective too, and I'll just say, who here is familiar with the OODA loop? If you want to be in this space, everyone in this room needs to have their hand up, to be quite honest. This is a decision-making model that's used by the military, and it goes through this cycle over and over again. If you're not familiar with this, or you're not familiar with kill chains, please get familiar with these two things. It's critical for you to be able to connect and have a common shared language in what you're talking about. These are just some examples. This isn't holistic, but quantum technologies and looking at them as a portfolio of technologies will fundamentally, and are already beginning to fundamentally disrupt the OODA loop. One example, just right at the top from the observe perspective, I would argue that quantum sensing is bringing us into a post-stealth era right now. if you think of the implications for that in a defense context, it's just completely transformational. And when you need to be looking at countermeasures as well, it's really hard to plan your countermeasures when you don't understand what you're up against in that space. And you can go through each of these items and you can map quantum technologies across a whole number of use cases within the OODA loop. But this is really, and I think Joe had mentioned this, this was one of my stamps on Buzzword Bingo, but it's really quantum technologies are providing decisive battlefield advantage. And we've really got to grow our understanding of what this looks like. Just some pictures. This is a bit of a cartoon on this side, comes from a paper a few years ago, but just gives you a bit of this in context of understanding defense systems and some of the implications for this as well. There's some more detailed pictures coming up from NATO and Air Force Research Lab, FRL over in the US, UK, and a number of others, but this is going to impact all defense systems when you're looking at the portfolio of these together and the integration that's needed. I think another really key piece to understand, I'll get back to this as well, I think a lot of times we think about quantum technology as being a widget or a computer or some kind of device. Quantum technologies are, in many cases, especially for a lot of the new technologies or new platforms that are coming aboard, they are the critical subsystems for them as well. And to give you an example with that, if you look at Arctic Over-the-Horizon Radar, which is a new deployment for Canada, ultimately what's going to make that work is ultra-precise timing. You take out the ultra-precise timing, you don't have a system anymore. That's a quantum clock that's behind that. Timing is also integral to so many different systems going forward. So we need to be thinking about all these big procurements that we're making. These are going to be systems that are going to be online for decades to come. These are multi-billion-dollar purchases. It's not just the initial purchase. You've got to think about the life cycle that's going to go with that as well. So we've got to service these things. We've got to be able to repair them. We need to be looking at modernization. This is capability development and sustainment for decades. And we need to be thinking about from an operational sovereignty perspective, but also from an industrial development perspective. What choices are we going to be making here? And do we want to be pulling through our Canadian capabilities and strengths that we've been developing over the past decades to see them come across the line? Because frankly, our allies and our adversaries are doing this. So mapping this back to the OODA loop, what I would love to do is I'm going to share some observations, the first part of the OODA loop. I've got 10 of them. It's a mix of quantum and things that aren't quantum but are impacting quantum as well. I'm going to share kind of just a summary at a high level of how we've been orienting so far traditionally in these kind of sectors or these spaces, where I would suggest we reorient and a guiding question for that, and then what'll be key for decision and action, which I will put back over to you on that front. So playing from the Prime Minister's recent speech over at Davos, he talks about we're in the midst of a rupture and not a transition. And ultimately, the assumptions that we've been operating on across all aspects of our economy and defense don't hold anymore. And technology is really a frontier part of this, because technology is so integral to protection, to power, and to prosperity. And quantum sits at the heart of this as well, as we're looking at standing up a completely new platform going forward. So it's really an interesting time for us to, I think, be looking at a convergence of a whole bunch of things right now. There's been just an incredible developments in quantum, especially just in the last year. If I look across the board and seeing what's coming, we've got an acceleration of what we're seeing with defense spending, moving over to a warfighting posture, and also just a need where sovereignty, is something we're talking about every day that was just something we took for granted before. So all these things are coming together at this moment. I think with this, and I alluded to this, we're entering a once-in-a-generation investment cycle for Canada. It's kind of like defense procurement Christmas is one way you can think about it. But if you look across from, I mentioned Arctic Over-the-Horizon Radar, if you look at frigates with River-class destroyers, if we look at military satellite constellations, if we look at submarines, I can keep going on, air and missile defense systems, all these kind of things. These are massive, massive procurements that are underway right now or coming up soon. All these, again, are going to be online for decades to come. They need to be quantum ready and they need to be quantum enabled. Those design decisions are being made right now. So this is a big choice, not to put the pressure on Joe and his team with the defense industrial strategy going forward, but this is really that inflection point around this where we could be looking at, if we want to be standing up our ecosystems, seeing our industry develop, these are massive opportunities that will have ripple effects going through for decades going forward. So having the chance to bring these emerging technologies in, to bring industry in, to be shaping those requirements, because a lot of this is still evolving. And it's choices that we're making now. And even if you take over the Horizon Radar, for example, that procurement has been has been made, but the deployment of the system, I think, is around 2029 or so. They're preparing the sites and that. So you really do have to have that foresight and that futures design work as you're planning out these systems and thinking about what are the pieces or the different things that we're going to integrate that might not be ready yet, but can be ready. And we need to start looking at, what can we be accelerating? What do we have here? What do we want to ensure we will have here, the supply chains that go with it and all the knock-on effects from that. I'd argue with this as well. I don't think this window is going to reopen again, not in our lifetimes. Surely with this, I hope not with the posture that we're seeing. So it's a really key window right now, and that timing is our scarcest resource on this. Other piece to understand, this was mentioned this morning as well, is quantum is not one thing. We tend to think about quantum as being monolithic or as a bit of a shorthand. It is a lot of different things arriving at different times as well. So we've got a whole portfolio of technologies, whole wide range of capabilities, different demands for their supply chains. So it's on a supply chains with an S. So we can't just look at a one size fits all approach to how we're rolling these out either. So that nuance is really important. And I think it's also really important for those of us a little bit more in the know that we're thoughtful about our language. I find in Canada, and some of it's a bit of an awareness piece, but the words quantum and quantum computing get used interchangeably. And I love quantum computing, super cool. It's, incredible potential, but there's a lot more to quantum technologies than just quantum. So really key that we get that right in our language for what we see in policy documents, in media and other areas as well. And that we start shining a light on some of the other quantum technologies that, are really cool as well. David's got his sensor sitting just over here, but aren't necessarily top of mind for people if they know of the word quantum or hear about it. This was also mentioned this morning, but I think another piece to really highlight is the quantum race has really shifted phases. And this has happened pretty quickly considering, it's been 3 years now for the National Quantum Strategy or so, 3 years for Quantum 2030, the defense side of it. NATO, you mentioned, released their quantum strategy just 2 years ago. They're updating it this year because things have shifted so quickly. And they're needing to recalibrate on that to align with some of the new advances of this. So it's a big shift that's happening. I think in Canada, we tend to, in different circles where we still talk about this being a research project rather than being a systems engineering challenge. And that's not to say that research doesn't still need to happen. It really does. But it's a very different game to play when you're looking at how do we pull these through to acquisition and look at deployment and look at actually standing up an industry that goes with that. And what's really important for us to realize is that what got us here to this position, this leadership position, isn't going to get us there in the next leg of the race and put us on the podium that way. So we need a different set of tools to be working with and a different mindset to move us to that next phase. And this is the phase that's really going to matter going back to the defense context when we're looking at the deployment of capabilities and operational sovereignty. Other observation, and we've probably been one of the loudest voices in this space, is commercialization and industrialization are not the same thing, and we need both of them. We tend to talk about commercialization a lot, which is great. It's really important. That can a company sell something? Industrialization is, can a country reliably build, integrate, sustain, and upgrade capability at scale? This is a big challenge that a lot of companies are facing right now as they've gone to the prototype, or I think about it as the artisanal or Etsy phase of quantum technologies. And they need to be able to scale that up to have that sustained deployable capability for as things are commercialized. We're needing both, but one doesn't guarantee the other. And this is one that I think has been underemphasized in Canada. We're seeing most other leading countries or leading regions for quantum all have advanced manufacturing strategies around this. And they're ensuring they're not trying to do everything, but they're trying to ensure they've got some key aspects of this. The US is looking at this. Europe's recently made some investments in this. Some key Northeast Asian countries are looking at this as well. Canada has some really great foundations here that we can be building on. We don't need to start from scratch in this, but we do need to get a plan together, and we can deploy capital in a much smarter way. And we can be looking at where can we maybe not pick winners, but I'll say back winners in this space. And this is stuff as well. If you look at the capital that's needed, if you look at the timelines to set this up, if you look at the talent and the expertise that's needed, we have to plan ahead. This can't be an afterthought within this. And I think sometimes we talk about supply chain resilience as an auditing game. Wrong way to look at it. You've got to look at this from the outset going forward as to what do we need and how do we set that up. But ultimately, I would look at industrial capacity as being strategic infrastructure in how we build this forward. And this can tie back also to, critical minerals and leveraging what we have here in Canada and some other key assets with it. But this can be a real value creation piece. I think it was Raph mentioned in your question too, is, we send our IP as our designs abroad. If we can be keeping that here, there's a huge security aspect with this as well. Other observation, quantum is a capital-intensive, dual-use, defense-first domain. I'll qualify capital-intensive because everyone's got a different viewpoint of this, and different companies, again, different technologies. But what I'll say with quantum generally, it's this isn't like a SaaS software you're going to build over a weekend in your mom's basement. It's a little bit costlier than that, and a little bit more sophisticated on some of the pieces with it. But really looking at this, a lot of this is government-backed or government-driven, which is what we've seen historically with the deepest of deep tech. If you look at the development of semiconductors, space sector, the internet, EVs even, and for these, it was all driven by government coming in and really de-risking the space and being a strategic partner, and also a strategic partner when it came to the procurement side of it as well. So in this context, it's really important to look at defense is not just downstream of the market, it is the market driver. And I don't think we brought that connection into Canada before in how we've done things, because we've generally trusted other economies to take care of doing that part. And I think we've lost a lot of the value capture because of that. So right now, I'm really excited to see the posture that we have right now, because I think this is one of the a rare occasion where we have to get this right and test out a new mindset, a new approach with defense, and integrating emerging technologies with this that are, not just a nice to have, but are really becoming a necessity in the defense context. Other piece related to this too is that, and I think this is something that distinguishes quantum from AI, and I'm not meaning to disparage AI within it, but in a lot of contexts within AI right now, it really is a money game. Who can buy the most GPUs will win within that. Within quantum, we need capital, that's for sure. But it's not the only guarantee for success with this. Ingenuity is a really key piece. And to me, that's been Canada's story. If I had one word to describe Canada's quantum sector and Canada's quantum ecosystem, it's been our ingenuity. And I look at our, the startups that I have the privilege of working with every day are some of the most innovative people and companies I've seen, and they're forced to be. They're so capital efficient with what they're doing, is they have to be. They have to rely on their ingenuity to be able to succeed. And that is a really key competitive advantage to go forward with that. And something I think also because of Canada's ecosystem, where we've got so many different quantum capabilities, we've got some really great people here. That's something we can continue to nurture to give us an edge, but it does have to be backed with capital to go with it. Other one, and literacy gaps came up this morning as well. So that was another big stamp on Buzzard Bingo. I think there's a couple lenses to this right now, but something I've seen is quantum, especially the defense and security space, but I would say in the civilian space as well, it's moving far faster than our shared understanding. And there's a couple issues with this. One, there's just quantum literacy gaps, and I run into this all the time, and it's very understandable, because I think the barrier to entry for quantum is quite high, and something that we need to be working on as a sector and making quantum a lot more approachable. But it's really tough when you're trying to navigate, a space where we're all trying to get our head around defense, and then you add quantum to the mix and have to say here's a quantum clock, and here's what it's going to do in your defense system, or just trying to understand those pieces of it. So there's the quantum literacy gaps, but I think the other piece that we're grappling with as a country right now, and has broader implications, is the defense literacy gaps that go with it. So as a country, this is a new space for a lot of people. We need to ensure over time we've got continued support of the country and Canadians in doing this. There's a lot of policy folks who are just orienting to this for the first time. And frankly, a lot of startups are just trying to get their head around this. And this is probably one of the highest barrier to entry markets to be coming into as well. And the demands for what's needed for them from a performance perspective and a reliability perspective is huge. So trying to figure this out, I think, will be a really key piece, because you can only be sovereign over what you understand. And if we're not starting to understand what the implications are of advancements in quantum technologies, of the technologies themselves, but also of the defense space and moving through this, I think we're going to be in a really tough place. This is related, I think, in some ways to some of the literacy gaps on both sides. But defense contracting has really been a structural barrier for a lot of quantum SMEs. And I think some of the SMEs in this room can talk about that a little bit more. But defense, again, with quantum being defense first in most contexts, it's one of the earliest and most important markets to be able to develop. But again, one of the hardest to enter, especially if you're an SME, when we've got a landscape in Canada where we're used to working with incumbents and we're used to working with foreign primes and then working through the ITB system to try and retrofit afterwards. So just some of the barriers that our companies face is there'll be a contract, for example, where they need to have a security clearance to bid on the contract, but they can only get the security clearance if they have the contract. And then they go to get the security clearance and it takes 2 or 3 years, if they're lucky, to go through that side. The certification and compliance requirements also take years to work through. And if you're an SME in the space, the cost with them is really, really hard to try and work through. Procurement timelines, I'll give an average across the NATO alliance. Procurement for defense technology averages 16 years, which working on bringing down within that. But if you're a startup, I mean, it's untenable to look at that kind of context. So we really need to be accelerating procurement and simplifying the complexity around that as well. And just the costs to be in the game for this are also very prohibitive for a lot of SMEs. So again, if you're a large incumbent, this is your day-to-day. This is your status quo. But if you're an SME in the game, this is existential to try and play in this space. And in the Canadian context, our entire homegrown quantum ecosystem are SMEs. The largest Canadian quantum company is Xanadu. And you're at what, 250-ish? 270, and growing quickly. But still, just for context with this, we want to be supporting Canadian quantum champions. We've got to figure out how to work with them and work with them directly, being SMEs. Last observation, and then I'll turn over to orientation on this. Canada has just some incredible strengths in this space. And with that, we've got some of the predictable failure modes. But we know this is coming, so we know to get in front of this. I just feel so privileged to get to do what I do every day because I get to work with some of the most ambitious innovators on the planet, some of the most creative innovators on the planet. And this has really been something that's developed over decades. Canada was one of the first countries to recognize the quantum opportunity. It's not just that we started doing the R&D. Canada started commercializing quantum technologies before most countries even saw the strategic opportunity with them. It really is an incredible Canadian story. And I think about it, just the impact that Canada has had globally on the quantum landscape, a lot like the NHL. If you took the Canadians out of the NHL, you wouldn't have much of a hockey league. And if you took the Canadians out of the global quantum landscape, there wouldn't be much there. We've had just an incredible outsized impact in this space. If you look at it from research breakthroughs, you look at it from companies as well, and even a lot of the foreign companies, if you look at their executive teams, there's typically at least one Canadian on them, if not more as well. We've really punched above our weight in this space. Some other things too that I think really go for us, especially in the context right now, because of that early start in part, but also some of the brand with Canada, we're very high trust and have very solid technical credibility amongst our allies. And this is really key for the defense market in Canada. Being on the smaller side, a company can't just sustain themselves alone in the Canadian defense market. They've got to think globally in what they're doing. And very few countries have these capabilities. So that brand of trust and that credibility that we have is something that we can be exporting or leveraging as we're looking to export as well. And again, just the true dual use relevance. I'm really hammering the defense angle right now, but these truly are dual use technologies that have a wide range of civilian implications. They'll likely be proven out first in defense markets, and then they'll make their way out into the civilian world like we've seen with many other deep tech innovations. The frictions, though, are real, and a lot of them were talked about this morning, and I think the panel this afternoon might talk about them a little bit more. And they're not just specific to quantum either. Some of these frictions, these are just a reality, I think, of being in a deep tech and a hard tech sector in Canada, but we've seen that undercapitalization that has some compounding effects. Procurement is painful, to say the least. I won't hammer on that more. And our policy frameworks, a lot of them have been optimized for research, not for the industrialization or deployment or the commercialization side. We know this is coming. So with that in mind, let's look at just how do we orient a little bit. And again, we're at this, we're all waiting with suspense for the defense industrial strategy, not thinking that's going to be a fix-all for everything. But I think it's a really important time for us to take a step back and really think about what's the lens that we're bringing to make decisions and to make strategy around this. Traditionally, this is how I would sum up Canada's approach. We lead in tech R&D, and then we follow when it comes to policy and adoption. This isn't just a government thing either on that side. If you look at data on the business sector, and if AI is one of the most recent examples for this, Canada is one of the countries with the lowest trust in AI and one of the lowest adoption rates as well. So this is really a whole society lens that we need to be bringing for this and thinking about how do we really push forward in the commercialization of technologies. At the end of the day, great companies have great customers, and they like to be close to their customer base as well. So how do we look at, in this context, that we're really good adopters of and really good deployers of quantum technologies as we go forward? But we've got to get past this, inventing something early and then giving it over to others for the value creation side of that we could be owning a lot more of that value chain here in Canada. And this really is a sovereignty, and it really is a prosperity question for us. And there can be a more opportune time to be asking that question. So how do we reorient is what I would suggest. And now's the time to do it. If I wanted to boil it down just to one question, I think the defense industrial strategy will be a really good driver, but a really good test of this question is: which quantum capabilities must Canada understand deeply, shape deliberately, and nurture intelligently in order to retain leverage and advantage? And again, no pressure, Joe and team, but I think just looking at the convergence of all these things coming together, at the end of the day, quantum is going to be the canary in the coal mine for the defense industrial strategy, and seeing what that success is going to look like, and look at, have we written a different history with this technology platform for our country? And with that, I think the lens to keep in mind as we look at deciding and acting, and this is going to be a collective thing that we all need to be working on together, and all different stakeholders. So forums like this are really important for that. But in quantum, investment buys options. We had that early investment that's given us some options. More investment is needed right now as we're playing a bit of a different game. Ingenuity creates that advantage. That's been one of our superpowers. But at the end of the day, it's going to come down to strategy and execution that are going to decide what value Canada actually captures, and its ability to protect its own sovereignty in this case.